As well, I put in some insights from my father's life. People always ask me questions. They're always so interested. Tell me about your dad. Is he the real deal?
Yep.
Is he kind of fake? What were some of his weaknesses? So I share a lot of that as well. In every chapter, I thought I want to share an insight to the audience and peek behind the curtain to tell you about my dad and how he practiced habit 5 or didn't practice it and that kind of thing.
Hey there, and welcome to the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast. I'm TJ Hoisington, and I have a new success interview for you. I had the privilege of interviewing Sean Covey.
You already know. My passion and my mission to help you unleash your greatness within. My heart goes out to the underdogs that's on their way. If you think you can go from good to great, okay, let's motivate. GreatnessWithin.com. TJ Hoisington. GreatnessWithin.com.
You see, Sean Covey is the president of FranklinCovey Education, and he's also a New York Times bestselling author. But you know, this was really special today. Although I've always wanted to have Sean on the podcast, today was really special because it is the 30th year anniversary since 7 Habits of Highly Effective People came out. The book that his dad wrote, which has been on the bestseller list ever since. In fact, it's one of the top 1, 2, or 3 business books of all time. In fact, it has sold over 40 million copies. Unbelievable, right? And so we go through this book, which has just been released, this version of it, where Sean Covey actually, without changing anything Stephen Covey, his dad, put in the book, he, at the end of every chapter, he puts some additional insights and ideas and applicable information, and he gets real. He kind of like pulls the curtain back and shows you a little bit of the inside world of Stephen Covey and his family and so forth, and how the principles can really apply to you. And that's exactly what we do in this interview that you're about to listen to. Wow, we really go into the principles pretty heavy and deep, and we take our time and go through it. And let me tell you something, it was really cool to have him on the show and explain all 7 of the principles from 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, in addition to his insights. And let me just quickly say, if you're watching this on YouTube, I invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Make sure you click that notification bell so you're the first to be notified when I come out with a new success interview like this or a motivational message. If you're listening to this because you downloaded it from Apple Podcasts or one of the other podcast platforms, listen, I invite you to subscribe to my podcast. And hey, I just thank you for being a part of my community. All right, without any further ado, let's jump right into the interview. Sean, welcome to the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast.
TJ, it's great to be with you.
No, it is great to have you. Absolutely. And it's great to have you on the show. I've wanted you on the show for a long time. You know, your dad has had a powerful impact in the world with his 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And by the way, there's a new book coming out, which is the 30th anniversary edition of the book, which I don't think the audience can see it right here, but you put a lot of your own content in it, which we'll jump into in a second. But to bring this up is not to overshadow the fact that you yourself are a New York Times bestselling author. You've had your own string of successes and books and works and so forth. And it's a pleasure to have you on the show, Sean.
Thank you so much, TJ. It's a pleasure to be on your show. And I've been following you through the years. We met, how many years ago was it?
That's like 15 years ago.
15 years ago, and we've stayed in contact, and it's just I'm just thrilled to see about how well you're doing and your success, and so it's a great honor to be on your show. It really is.
Well, thank you. I honor that. Let me back up and let's talk about that. I had just written If You Think You Can when I reached out to you. And I had this idea because I had so many parents coming to me to say, hey, do you have some content for teenagers? And I remember I printed out the book. I think I sent it to you in a 3-ring binder. Mm-hmm. And then you sent me back an endorsement for If You Think You Can. And I think it's probably one of the best endorsements I ever read because of this one line that's on the front of it, which says, one of the best teen books I've ever read. I love it.
Yeah, that's good.
And then
It was a great book.
oh, well, thank you.
It's really well done.
You know, there's a side story to it that I've never shared. And my brother and I took a little road trip. I was on a speaking engagement to Hanscom Air Force Base, and we decided to go down to Nauvoo, Illinois. And it just so happened, when we showed up, your dad, Stephen Covey, was speaking that night. And we heard about this the speech that he was going to give. So we went to it, and it was a pleasure of mine. No one's ever seen this picture before, but it hangs in my office.
Yeah.
A picture with my big cheeks back then. With your dad, I went up to him after he spoke, and I said I loved his work and so forth. Yeah. And I said, hey, did you know that I sent a copy of my teenage version of my book to your son, Sean, to endorse? And it just so happened that your mom was sitting on the stand next to him. And she said, she leaned up to me and she said, what book was that? And I said, If You Think You Can for Teens. And she said, you know what? Sean had me read that book too, and it was a good book. So I don't know if you remember any of that, but
I don't remember that. No.
Yeah. So
awesome.
It was pretty cool to meet both of your parents that day. So.
Yeah, really cool.
Yeah,
well, that's great. It is a great book. So,
well, let's jump into this 7 Habits of Highly Effective People 30th edition, because you went through every chapter. And if I understand it correctly, you didn't change anything that your dad wrote. You added about 2,000 words at the end of each chapter. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. That's what happened. And it was not my idea at all. I did not want to do this, TJ.
Really?
Because when the publisher first approached me about it, and our own book people, they said, hey, we've got this idea. This book is, it sold 40 million copies, if you can believe it. So the best seller sells like 100,000 typically, you know?
Yeah, right.
This is sold for 40 million. So it's best-selling business book of all time. So I thought, I don't want to touch it. They came to me and said, hey, we want you to write some insights. I said, no way.
Right.
And then 2 months later, they asked me again. I said, no, why would I? It's like the Bible. I'm not going to touch this.
Masterpiece, right? Yeah.
After 6 months, after pressuring me, I thought about it one night, and I thought, okay, wow, these 7 habits have impacted so many people personally. You can think of schools, you can think of military organizations, governments,
totally,
presidents of the United States, some of which spoke to my father and asked for his help. And I thought, I want to just share with the world the impact these habits have had upon everyone. It's not about me or my dad, because he used to say all the time, it's not about me, you guys, it's about these principles. And I want to start an organization so that these ideas live far beyond me, right? And so I just thought about it, and I thought, well, geez, if I could just share some of these stories and some of the impact this has had on people, I think my dad might like that. So I didn't want him to haunt me from his grave,
Right.
That you destroyed my book. So I was very careful. I didn't change one word of what he wrote because it's so good. But at the end of each chapter, like on Habit 1, I just said, let me tell you a story about Western Digital. This is a company that was hit from Thailand, that was hit during the floods about 10 years ago and was just devastated. A high-tech manufacturing company that everyone said would never recover. And they had this really proactive culture. They'd all been trained in the 7 habits.
Yep.
They said, there's no way we're going to let this destroy our company. And so they made a decision right then, under 8 feet of water, all their high-tech equipment.
Wow.
That we're going to not lay off one person, and we're going to make it. So for weeks, they had thousands of employees, 30,000 employees coming in, digging up stuff. They hired divers to come in and get their stuff off the floor and to clean it. The water finally receded 15 days later.
Right.
And they just worked like crazy. The senior executives working with the frontline workers. We can do this. And they were up and operating. Another 15 days later, they're up and operating and stole the whole market because everybody else went out of business, thought it was unrecoverable, stole the whole market and came back stronger than before. But just a terrific story of a culture that was so empowered to think about what you can do instead of what you can't.
Totally.
And so stories like that, I wanted to share, some personal, some organizational. As well, I put in some insights from my father's life. People always ask me questions. They're always so interested. Tell me about your dad. Is he the real deal?
Yep.
Is he kind of fake? What were some of his weaknesses? So I share a lot of that as well. In every chapter, I thought I want to share an insight to the audience and peek behind the curtain to tell you about my dad and how he practiced habit 5 or didn't practice it, and that kind of thing.
You know what? That's exactly what I was thinking as I was going through it. I read every one of your insights at the end of every chapter. And what I loved about it is how authentic and real you did pull back the curtain, if you will, and share insights about both your parents and situations that came up and also businesses alike. So really powerful and very real. And I was really thankful how real you got. So let's jump into the first principle. Okay. And that is it's prior to the first principle, but it's the foundation principle. And that is about paradigms, the inside out approach. Could you talk about our paradigms? Because I think listeners today, this is going to impact their reality going forward. It always does, it always has, and it always will. So could you touch on that?
Sure. Yeah. So again, my father used to always say, you don't get it. No one gets it. Yeah. Our own company doesn't get it. Paradigms are everything. Paradigms mean the lens through which you see the world, your perspective, your viewpoint, your interpretation of the world. And he always used to say, you know what, if you want to change your life, you can make small changes by changing behaviors. But if you want to make quantum changes, big changes, change your paradigm, the way you view things. And in fact, behavior changes won't stick unless you change your mindset, right? And so
totally.
He talked a lot about that. And everything we do at FranklinCovey now, whenever we talk about, we have a book called The 4 Disciplines of Execution. And it teaches companies how to execute in their highest priorities. And it's based on paradigms, right? Yeah. Like one of the paradigms we teach is everyone thinks you can do many things well at once as a company, right? You can have 5, 10, 6, 8 projects, big goals. Paradigm we teach is no, you can do 1, maybe 2 things well at one time. And we help companies say, you know what, you got far too many goals, they're not well written. And I promise you, if you can narrow it down to 1 or 2 things, and we recommend 1, watch the power of shifting that paradigm, right? So in the book, I don't know if you want me to tell a story about my son.
I do. Nathan, I thought that was a powerful story. And actually, it made me get choked up as I have my own memory with my son that I'll share too. So yes, please do.
Sure. Well, it's a good example of how I had to change my paradigm. And it's with my son, Nathan, who as a young boy had extreme, I'll call it social anxiety. Yeah. He'd get scared with anything that was out of his comfort zone, especially dealing with other people. Right. And so going to school was a big deal. Getting him to go to kindergarten was really hard. And first grade, kindergarten, he'd go about every other day. And it was a chore to get him to go. I remember one time about first grade, trying to get him out of the car at school. And I was with him and I had to tear off his fingers one by one. I read that. Off the seat. And I'm thinking, I don't know if this is good for my son. Part of me is thinking, don't do this. Don't push him. Part of me is thinking, no, toughen him up a little bit, right?
Right.
I'm tearing his fingers off. And I'm just like in bits myself over this, thinking, am I doing the right thing? And then I throw him over my shoulder. I got the principal to come help me. He came out of the building into the parking lot, and I handed Nathan to him. Nathan's fighting us. Principal throws him over his back. Yeah. He's carrying him into the school, and Nathan's slugging his back. I don't want to go.
Right.
In the car, and I cried because I thought, oh my gosh, that was horrifying. Am I doing the right thing? And this kid is going to be really difficult raising him, And in second grade, I got him to try out for baseball. I had to talk him into it. Do you want to play? No way, Dad, no way. Finally, he said yes. We got to practice, first practice. Get out of the car. He sees the coach, the other players, anxiety, falls on the ground and plays dead.
Yeah.
Literally. I think we were reading bear books at the time about bear attacks.
So lay down and act dead.
He lays on the ground, plays dead. I'm thinking, no way you're doing this. It's so embarrassing, right?
Right.
As a parent.
Right.
I go get the coach. We're about 10 yards away from the other players who are warming up. I say, my son, he's kind of struggling. Can you come talk with him? He comes over. Hey, Nathan, Coach Smith, how you doing? Nathan's laying there. Nothing. Hey, Nathan, hey, it's cool. Just come up. We'll make things easy for you. Nothing. He laid there for the whole practice, 1 hour. Practice ended. He looked around. Nobody was there. He got up, hopped in the car as if nothing was wrong. And I'm thinking, no way, you just did that. I can't believe this kid. So I think over time, TJ, honestly, with good intent, I developed kind of a paradigm of him of insufficient.
That's
right? Not going to measure up, going to be a challenge. I love him, but he's not capable, right? And I was at a football game. This would have been in about 4th grade. And he's being really annoying. I'm already upset with him. And he's kicking the seat in front of him. The guy turns around and says, will you please get your son to stop it? Right? So I'm upset, and I reach over and I grab Nathan's arm and I squeeze it like parents sometimes do. I said, just stop it right now. And I was angry and upset and mad, and I squeezed him pretty hard on his arm. And he kind of just wilted and leaned back in his seat. And I felt such shame at that moment. I really did. I just felt like, I can't believe what I just did. And I felt in my conscience, you know how sometimes your conscience just like separates from you and then speaks to you like Jiminy Cricket?
Yeah.
And I felt, this is what I felt, and it was strong. It was this impression. Do you have any idea who this kid is and how great he is? And how dare you treat him and think of him that way? Just wait till you see what he becomes. That's what I felt, all in a matter of like 10 seconds.
Yep.
And it was an epiphany, moment of truth, moment of insight, discernment, following my conscience. And I sat back. It was so strong, the impression I had, that I just said, wow, where did that come from? And I looked over, and he was still kind of wilted from my anger. And I thought to myself, he is great. And how dare me feel and think of him that way? And I went home and I told my wife about what had happened. And I just said, you know what? This kid is amazing. We're seeing him wrong. We need to just kind of let go, not see him as insufficient or incapable. Let him blossom at his own time, in his own way, and not force it. Let's help him, but not force it, and he'll be fine. So we shifted our paradigm. We really did. And it was this event that created that. And I remember meeting with him one time, and I said, Nathan, you're going to be fine. You're going to get through this. Let's help your weakness become a strength. Because he recognized he had this weakness. Right. And he said, okay, Dad, I'd love your help. Well, a year later, he goes to a Leader in Me school, which is a school that teaches the 7 habits and teaches leadership. We have about 5,000 of them now across the world. And they asked him to speak at Leadership Day. It was the day when they showcase what they're doing.
Right.
He comes home. He goes, they asked me to speak, Dad. No way I'm going to do it. They just did that because you're the 7 habits guy. I said, Nathan, it wasn't me. It was to you. And I want you to call him right now and get me out of this. And I said, I'm not going to. Well, I'm going to do it then. I said, okay, but I think you should do it. Well, I didn't do anything. I wanted to see what he would do. And I watched quietly as it got closer and closer to the date, and I wouldn't pull him out. Part of me thought, he's going to get up and fake dead.
Yeah, right. Like you did earlier, right.
Sure. But then I thought, no, he can do this. And then I thought, I saw him prepare quietly his own speech. He got up on Leadership Day, 200 people. he gets up and he gave a little speech on habit 5, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And he talked about how he had bad ankles and they hurt, and how some doctors didn't listen to his problems and how it hurt and when it hurt. And so he wouldn't listen to their prescription, right, because of that. And he taught it really beautifully. And halfway during the speech, which was about 2 minutes, no, maybe 3 minutes, he paused from fear. And it was a moment of decision. And he wanted to freak out from fear. He looked around and he paused for maybe 10 seconds. And then all of a sudden he continued and finished. And afterwards he got a big ovation, and it changed him. Yes. He was so proud of himself. He got home and he thought, I'm a good speaker. And then he started taking speaking opportunities and looking for more and asking for them. Yep. He got better and better. By the time he got into high school, he's the most confident, outgoing kid you'll ever meet, full of compassion because he lived with this problem all through his childhood, right, where he couldn't be around people. And now he's just the opposite, and his weakness became his strength. And it was really incredible to see and to witness. And I attribute it to, I think he would have turned out great either way, but clearly we had a big role in this, my wife and I. We had to shift our paradigm. Once I shifted my paradigm and I thought, there's greatness in this kid, and he's going to blow me away. He felt that, and that was communicated in 100 ways to him, right? Through little nuances and how I behaved and how I treated him and so on. And it communicated worth and potential and capability and sufficiency. So that's the power of a paradigm, is it is the lens through which you see everything. And if you see differently, you can perform at such a higher level.
That's true. And that's where the breakthroughs come, is when you have these moments of insight. That when I read the story, I thought of an experience I had in my home where my son, Connor, second son, he's in Croatia right now, but Connor was always the kind of boy that was really gung-ho, and then he would borrow a tool or something, never put it back where he got it. I could never find the tool. Or he would break something because he wouldn't read the instructions, and then he'd try to put it together on his own. And I would, at times growing up, get frustrated with him that you're impulsive. Anyway, so he's in high school. I'm sitting on the couch. He comes in, he breaks something, and I got upset. Sitting there, he's in high school, he's standing up, sitting there. I said, Connor, why are you so impulsive? Why can't you be patient? Connor, why can't you be this person?
Yeah.
And in high school, he's strong-willed too. He pushed back at me. He said, Dad, why are you always judging me? Why are you always being hard on me? And I said, because Connor, you don't slow down and think. Now, this is not something I'm proud of, right? Yeah. This was just a moment in time.
Yeah. Happened.
And it happened. And I remember he stormed off and he went to his room. Strong, big teenager. And I sat there on the couch and felt like I won the battle. Right? I'm good. But as I sat there, a couple minutes later, that conscience spoke to me and said, TJ, you didn't win nothing. And I remember getting up and going to my room. Sorry. I knelt at the side of my bed and I just closed my eyes and thought about the dad I was being. And in that moment, I had pure intelligence flow into me, which said this. TJ, the reason you're critical of him is because he's just like you. TJ, you can be impulsive. TJ, you sometimes won't read the instructions and break whatever you're working on, right? TJ, you, and in a matter of 10 seconds, just like you said, I saw this whole new view of my weaknesses relative to what I was judging him about. And I remember, I think I said a quick prayer, and then I went to his room. I knocked on the door, opened it up, and I apologized. And I said, Connor, I owe you a huge apology. I have been judging you for this, and this. And I just realized at the heart level that really I've been judging myself. And I apologize that I've inflicted that onto you. And from that moment on, I think it was the sophomore, junior in high school, my attitude toward him completely changed.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that, TJ. And that's so similar. And
similar.
Paradigm shift, and the behaviors that flow from that are so easy. They come naturally. You don't have to force them or practice. They just come.
Yeah.
That you see correctly. And these are examples of paradigms towards other people. We also have paradigms about ourselves that are often wrong.
Yes.
Like, I'm not a morning person, or I'm not good at this, or right, that we have to shift. Or we have paradigms of the world in general that are off, that are wrong, that we can shift. And you want to get correct paradigm. You think about the power of seeing the sun as the center of the universe instead of the world, right? Yeah. How that changed everything once you saw correctly. In the same way, if we can get correct views of other people and who they really are, of ourselves and who we really are, it can be a powerful thing. And these paradigm shifts can happen sometimes by accident, like this,
right?
Serendipity.
Yep.
But sometimes what do you do if you really need to change something? Sometimes changing your role can be a good thing. Sometimes reading a book can do it. Talking with another person, getting a different perspective, educating yourself. These are ways of shifting your paradigm.
But I think we are going on a walk, right? I mean, I just think we have to, part of the problem is we live in a fast-paced culture. Yeah. And to be able to have those moments, we have to slow down, and we have to push away the distractions. Like, just take some time to separate from everything for a season, for a few minutes, for something, so that you can hear the voice within, or the voice from wherever it comes from. I mean, it's powerful. So I have a thought about that. So one of the things we do in our business is we do executive coaching. Similar, I'm sure you guys do the same thing over at FranklinCovey. And so as I was coaching someone this past week, an executive, a female, I'm helping her become a better leader in terms of her influence and so forth, and doing what I can do to help. And actually, this company has 20 people that I'm working with, all leaders in the company. And this particular person said, hey, TJ, we've had a couple calls now, and I feel like we don't really need to talk about my personal thoughts and ideas in life. I just want you to help me on the leadership stuff. Yeah. And I was taken aback by that. And I said, I don't think that's reality. Yeah. I said, listen, without using her name, I said, listen, I have found in 20 years of leadership training, high performance training and consulting and so forth, that if all you do is focus on the secondary greatness, right? If all you do is focus on the title, the authority, the leadership itself, without working on the person behind it, it won't last. Yeah. And I had to coach that. What would you say about that? Because some people don't want to talk about the personal, but it is in the personal that they will succeed.
Yeah, well, I agree. I think that's what the 7 Habits teaches, right? It's inside out.
Yeah, right.
You really want to change your team, change your division, change your organization. It starts with you, change your relationship. And it's really hard to separate the two, right?
Yeah,
how you treat other people, it's going to come from who you are as a person, your character. And so you got to work at the roots for sure. So I totally agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
And oftentimes you cannot succeed with other people. In the 7 Habits lingo, we call it the public victory, right? Yeah. Habits 4, 5, and 6 are all about working well with other people, but you can't succeed there till you work on the roots, right? It's yourself. It's taking responsibility, not being a victim, and having a plan and having your values and so forth set. It gives you the foundation to work well with other people. And too often we're trying to solve relationship problems at the relationship level, when the problem is you got to go to the roots. You're up in the trees and the branches, right? You got to go down to the roots and fix the motive, a paradigm, an insight that's wrong or needs to be corrected or fixed or improved, right? Before you can deal with this branch up here that's broken.
Love that. Love that. True principle. Okay, let's jump in to the first, habit, which is, you talked about, Nathan, is be proactive. You talk about how whenever you would complain, your dad would stop you and correct you from blaming external sources rather than taking responsibilities. Talk about that for a second.
Because that's when people ask me, what was it like being raised in the home of Stephen R. Covey? That's the first thing that comes to mind, is how he always made us take responsibility for everything. This is far before he had written the 7 Habits book, right? Just a principle. Right. So I'd come home from school. My teacher stinks. I'm going to flunk algebra and it's his fault. And he'd take you aside, and he was always gentle about it, and he'd say, hey, you're being a victim. Look at your language. Mm-hmm. You're going to flunk algebra and it's his fault. Yeah, he stinks, Dad. He's such a jerk. You'd say, well, why are you talking about him? Why don't you go talk with him?
Yes.
You can go and talk with him about how things are going in class and what's working, what's not, and what he could do to improve. And I'd say, Dad, you're such a weirdo. Where's Mom? Mm-hmm. And I'd go and I'd talk to Mom, and she'd say, yeah, he is a jerk. You're right, Sean. So she'd always side with you, right? And it was a great combination, because Dad was loyal to principles and Mom was loyal to you, and the truth was somewhere in the middle. And
you said that in the book right here. You say, yeah. You said this, quote, Dad was always loyal to the principles. Mom was always loyal to you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that was a really good lesson he taught us, is, you know what, you're responsible. Don't be a victim. Watch your language. Take initiative. I remember another time I came home from school in college and said, I can't get into the class I wanted. And he went, what do you mean? Well, it was full. What does that have to do with it? Oh, well, I called up and they said there was a waiting list, and now I'm not going to get in. And he goes, well, what are you going to do about it? Mm-hmm. He said, well, I'll have to take it next year, but it's going to be a problem. Well, why don't you go talk with the teacher and tell him you're going to bring your own chair? So I said, okay. So I went and talked to the teacher and said, I really need this class and I'll bring my own chair. Is that okay? And the teacher said, sure, go ahead. Fine with me. And I came home and I thought, you know what? Most of the time, there's always a solution if you take initiative. You don't have to be a jerk or be unpleasant or boot anybody else out. It's just be pleasant and persistent and take initiative and watch what you can do, right?
And think out of the box, right? Your dad said, stretch a little bit, Sean. Stretch, think outside, be creative.
Yeah, exactly. So that was one of the key ideas he taught me. And that's one of the key principles of Habit 1. You know, it's initiative, taking initiative, and it's being responsible.
Yeah.
And you're not a victim.
You're not a victim. Love that. Habit number 2, begin with the end in mind. You started off by talking about Clayton Christensen, which is a great story about don't blow your life, basically, because he's talked about all these graduates from Harvard that had gone down a dark path in their lives. And he said, here's how you can prevent yourself from doing it. But then later on in that section, you talked about your great grandfather, I believe it was, Stephen Mac Covey. And I thought this story relative to your dad is a powerful story. Could you share that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And it kind of illustrates the importance of beginning with the end in mind, and how everyone listening right now, you have a mission. You have an important purpose. There's things that only you can do. And sometimes you need to step back and ask yourself, what is life asking of me? Looking at your whole life, right? And you might, for example, need to be the peacemaker in your family. Maybe your family's getting torn apart and you're the one that can help bring them back together. Or maybe there's something at work, a certain role that you need to take on, a responsibility, right? You have a sense for what that is. So going to that story, if you've ever been to Salt Lake City, there's a hotel downtown called Little America.
Yeah.
It's kind of a famous hotel, and it's much bigger now than it used to be. But many years ago, my great-grandfather, Stephen Matt Covey, lived in Wyoming, and he was a shepherd, of all things. He had a lot of sheep. One night during the winter, he was caught in a storm. It got to 30 below. He was freezing. He thought he was going to die. And he was in his 20s. And he, at that moment, prayed and he said, God, if you will save me, I will build a refuge right here on this very spot in memorial. He made it through the night. Many years later, he remembered his promise. He sold a lot of sheep. He built a hotel right there on the plains of Wyoming where he almost died. Right along a truck stop route, became very popular, called it Little America. And then he moved to Salt Lake City and built a bigger version of Little America and had a successful hotel going. His son, my grandfather, Stephen G. Covey, ran the hotel. My father was raised as a little hotel brat, right? Running around the hotel, watching his dad run it. As the oldest son, he was going to be the next guy to operate the hotel, right? Being primed for that. Went to Harvard Business School, came back so they could do the transition from father to son to run the hotel. While he was at Harvard, he said, I discovered my passion for teaching and for people and for paradigms and principles, and it's a whole new world for me. And I didn't want to be a hotel operator. I didn't want to run the family business. I wanted to be a teacher, but I was so afraid to tell my dad. So he got his courage up one day after returning home. Dad, I don't want to run the hotel. I want to be a teacher. I'm so sorry. I know how disappointing this must be for you. His dad looked at him and said, you know what, Stephen? I never liked business myself. You be a teacher. And so he became a teacher. My uncle, John, asked him, well, if you don't want to run the hotel, what do you want to do? He said, I want to unleash human potential. He was in his 20s, young 20s when he said that. Yeah. But he had this sense of mission about what he wanted to do, that he could do this. And he loved teaching and changing mindsets. And so he became a professor for 30 years, and then he developed the 7 habits through all of this and really pursued his passion and his vision for becoming a teacher. And when he passed away, that's what he wanted on his tombstone, a teacher. So that's just a great example of someone that was really mission driven, and it's not unique to him. I think we all have a sense of mission. He always used to say, you don't invent your mission, you detect it.
Yes.
Think about that. You don't invent it, you detect it. In other words, it's inherent in you. You know what it is, and you've got to sense what it is. And so in this chapter, we encourage people to write a personal mission statement, and the power of getting a really good mission, a constitution, personal constitution of your own life, what's important to you, what you value, what you uniquely can accomplish, what the contribution is you can make to the world. And everyone can have one. It doesn't have to be long or short. It can be whatever you think it should be. It's not, you don't have to share it with others. You can. I've shared it with my wife, and that's about it. My own personal one.
Yep.
I've had a lot. I've narrowed it down to one sentence. It means a lot to me. It drives me every day. And it has to do with my family and my contribution at my work. And so I don't want to underestimate the importance of having a personal mission. And if you have one, great, refine it. If you haven't written one, take the time to do so and watch the magic it can produce.
I love that, and I agree with it wholeheartedly. The whole idea of 20 years of unleashing your greatness within concepts were really similar to the story of your dad, right? I just one day woke up and realized these principles can have impact in people's lives. I was 15 years old anyway, I don't need to go into that. But what I will say is this past week with another person I was coaching, it's just popped in my mind. is with all the change that's going on with COVID-19 right now, based on the timing, she says, TJ, I've always been a career woman. I'm an executive. But I have 3 kids. And now that we've been sort of confined to our homes, don't share this with anybody. But I think there might come a change with my career status. I said, what do you mean? And she says, through this whole pandemic thing and being confined, I've realized that really I want to be a mom.
Yeah.
And I think that's a powerful motivator, right? That's a powerful mission to want to be a mom. I mean, for the first time, I'm going to say something kind of bold here, but for the first time, many parents are in a position where they've been forced to be a parent through all of this.
Yeah.
And what a beautiful thing that can be if you're listening, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's so good. It reminds me of a story my dad told me about an admiral in the Navy he had worked with, who was very ambitious, and he became, the head guy of a big battleship. And then he had a meeting with his dad, who was dying, and he never had a close relationship with his dad. And on his deathbed, his dad grabbed him by the shirt and said, I'm sorry, I don't have a relationship with you, son. And he said, don't do life like I did. Do not do your life like I did. I did not do right by you or your mother. And he died right then, right in his hands. He said it so shook him that he had a big change of heart. And he was always about himself and about his accomplishments. And he was an admiral, right? As high as you can get.
Oh, yeah.
And then he thought, you know what? I'm going to change. I don't want to do life like my dad did. And that was the greatest blessing he gave me, he said, was that last advice. So he really changed how he was treating his family. And then at work, as an admiral, he said, I wanted to leave, retire, and be known as the greatest admiral ever. And I wanted my successor to fail so everyone could see how good I was.
Oh yeah.
He said, and I changed my mindset to say, I want my successor, to be more successful than me. Because I don't want to do life like my dad did. And so I changed everything about how I set up systems for his success, how I trained him and deferred to him. And now it's many years later, and he has been extraordinarily successful. And I am so quietly happy inside.
Totally. And that right there is an example of the abundance mindset that you and your dad and your brother and so forth, that you all talk about, is having that abundance mindset, that there's more than enough pie for everybody. Okay.
Right.
Habit number 3, put first things first. And let me just point out a couple distinctions. You start off talking about Clayton Christensen. You talk about blocking out time in advance. You talk about the urgency addiction. And then you talk about the urgency index. Anyway, there's a question. I seem to do my best work when I'm under pressure concept. And then the time matrix. Will you talk about the importance of putting first things first?
Sure. Well, this is the habit that gets ranked the lowest when people score themselves and when other people do 360 surveys on people. Habit 3 is the hardest one to live, because we live in such an urgency addicted society, right?
Yep.
So many things coming at you. And it's so easy to let urgency be the dominating paradigm. And if it's urgent, it feels important.
Yep.
But it's deceptive. There's so much that's urgent that's not important at work and at home and in our lives. And so the key insight is you've got to make important your paradigm, speaking of paradigms, and focus on things that are important but not urgent. Okay, that's kind of the secret. We call it quadrant 2.
Yep.
Important but not urgent. And these are things like preparation and prevention and relationship building and what I call proactive work, which is doing work before it's due, right? Not waiting until the night before to do your paper, your research paper, but doing it 2 weeks before. The quality goes way up. Anytime you're in quadrant 2, exercise, things that are really important to you but aren't urgent right now. Relationships aren't urgent, but they're vitally important. And the more time you can spend on things in quadrant 2, planning, preparation, goal setting, and so forth, exactly, the more time you can spend there, the higher the return on your time and energy, truly. And your time and energy spent on things that are urgent and important is like 1 for 1. Urgent and not important, you get low return.
Yep.
1 equals a half, right? Quadrant 4, 0 return whatsoever. And quadrant 2 is exponential return. And this is a great concept if you're a team leader at work. Get your team into quadrant 2, working on things in advance. We have meetings on my team, and we always spend half the time on now and half the time in the next 3 years. It's been such a great discipline. So we're always thinking ahead, always planning way ahead. Do this yourself with your own habits. Take time for yourself, take time for relationships, prepare, prevent, and watch the great benefits that can come from putting first things first. We've found that the best way to do this is one of the best things you can do is to plan weekly.
Okay.
Plan on a weekly basis. If you plan on a daily basis only, it's not a bad thing. Wake up, plan your day, good thing, right?
Right.
But you're usually managing crises. You're managing the day. You got to pull back. You're too up close. You got to pull back, not to 6 years or 5 years, but down to like a week. We think a week is the perfect unit of time to maintain balance. So every week before your week begins, might be Sunday night, Monday morning, wake up, look at your week, block out time for the things that are most important to you by all of your roles. I'm a father. Okay, I'm going to do this date night with my daughter here Saturday morning. I've got this soccer game. Here's the time for my family.
Yep.
For my work, here are some big things I have to do. There's 1,000 little things that will come at me, but here's some big things I have to do. I got to prepare that budget. Is due in 3 weeks. I'm going to start now.
Yep.
If I block out time for the next 3 weeks, I'll be way ahead, right? Those kinds of things. Block them out in advance before the week hits, and it'll do more to increase your productivity than about anything else you can do.
Love that. Well said. Awesome. All right. Next habit. Habit number 4, think win-win. First seek to understand and then be understood. I was really amazed by how real you were with the story about the organization you teamed up with that ventured into an agreement with you guys for intellectual property. And would you just explain that story and how it was about to go to court and blah, blah, blah?
Sure. Yeah. So habit 4, think win-win, is the idea that typically 89% of the time, there's always a win-win solution. And it's a great paradigm of life. It's saying, you know what? I care about you and I care about me. Win-lose is I care about me. I want to beat you. I want to get ahead.
Right.
Lose-win is have your way with me. Everybody else does. Poor me. I'm the victim. Right. And to think win-win, you have to balance courage for what you want with consideration with what the other person wants.
Yes.
And that's the sign of maturity, is you can do both. If you're high courage, low consideration, you're just going to step on people. Be a bull in a china shop. If you're low courage, but high consideration, you're going to be lose-win. You're going to be stepped on. You're going to be a doormat your whole life, right? It's having both.
Let me pause you right there before we get into this. So we do an assessment with our clients, the Harrison assessment, and there's a paradox. It tracks all 172 human traits that we all have, and they can all be measured. But there's this paradox. You just labeled the same paradox we have, and with using 2 different words. But it's on one side, it's being assertive, which means you take consideration of your own wants and needs, right? But then across the bottom is helpful. You're serving other people. And what I have found with leaders, oftentimes, they're in many respects, they're very helpful, but that's a 9 or a 10 on a 10 scale.
Yeah.
But they don't take enough time out for themselves. So they end up staying in this portion over here, which is called self-sacrificing. The truth is, and it's what you're saying, is what your dad taught, what it had to do with balancing all the motives, right? Is you've got to have that balance where you help people, but you also make sure that you take time out for yourself. in the context that you help other people succeed. It's the mutual help quadrant. Anyway, there's a lot there to go over.
That's great.
Yeah.
Same idea.
Okay.
These are true principles, right? Principle is mutual benefit.
Yeah, it
right?
is, yes.
If you always seek mutual benefit in your life, watch the wonders that will happen.
Yeah.
So the experience I had with this, it was firsthand, was I was heading product development for FranklinCovey. We licensed our intellectual property to a small technology company. And it was a good win-win because they got our IP. In return, we got some royalty back from them. It's going fine for a couple of years, but after 2 years, we noticed they started using the IP and advertising and marketing in ways that were very uncomfortable to us. We didn't like it. And it got really bad. And at one point, I went and met with the partner, and I said, hey, we're going to have to pull your license if this continues. And he looked at me and said, what? You're going to pull our license? You're the one violating the agreement. And he named all these things and said, we're not doing anything wrong. He was kind of like in my face. And I thought, oh my goodness, I can't believe this company and this guy. So we talked some more and went back and forth. And finally, we came to the conclusion that we had to go to court. They wouldn't budge. And it was important. It was hurting our brand. And so I went to our legal and spoke with them, and they said, we'll win. They don't have a case. We have this really strong case. And then so that was where we were headed. And then I thought about what he had said to me, this partner, a few weeks before, and he said this. He goes, I know your uncle, and I'm good friends with him, and I've known your family from a distance for a while. I always thought you were good people until now. It was like a dagger to my heart.
Totally.
And I thought, you know what? I don't want to go to court. We very seldom have done this. I don't want to now. I gave him a call. I said, hey, this is going to cost us both a lot of money if we go to court. Would you be willing to meet with me? He goes, yeah, I'll bring my lawyer. No, without lawyers. Just two of us, one-on-one, to see if we could solve this in a way we both feel good about it. He said, well, I don't know. I said, really, I really think we might have a solution. We might not, but can we give it a try? Sure. Came to my office. We sat down, and I said, help me to understand how you see the situation, because it seems like we're at totally different ends. And I'm just going to capture, okay? I got up on the whiteboard. He said, one item. I wrote it down. Is that it? Yeah. 2, 3, 15 items. Anything else? I said. He listed a couple more. I repeated them all back. I said, you feel like I understand you? He said, yeah. And I said, I do understand you. And I felt it changed me because I thought, oh my goodness, he's right. We're violating the agreement as much as he is. And I saw his point of view for the first time clearly, because I had no agenda other than understanding. And then the feeling in the room started to change because I had changed. And then I said to him, would you mind if I shared with you in the same way you shared with me how I see it? Sure. He wrote down on a piece of paper. I went through the things one by one. Took about 15 minutes. He wrote them all down. He was polite. And he repeated them back just like I had done. He's just kind of mimicking me, right? And then he said, yeah, I can see your point of view too. The spirit in the room changed completely. We started advocating for each other. It was total understanding. It was complete intelligence, total understanding from both sides. All the cards were laid on the table. There's no secret agendas. And then in 30 minutes, we came up with a solution. We started brainstorming. 30 minutes came up with a solution. And it was, okay, we're gonna get the IP back at a certain price, but it's gonna be over a long period of time so you can transition your clients. And it worked out in a way we both felt really good about. Shook hands, saved tens of thousands of dollars legal fees.
Or more. Yeah.
Called me a week later. Sean, would you like to go to lunch with me? I said, of course. Went to lunch. He said, I always knew you had a good family.
That's awesome.
But all it takes to practice win-win, TJ, is for one person to start thinking that. And the other person will usually jump in and join you. And I'm not cynical or skeptical about this principle. It works
Yes.
almost all the time. There's always, almost always a win-win solution. And if there's not, you go for no deal, which is, hey, we agree to disagree and we'll part ways.
I always say in our sales training program and in our customer service program is law number one, seek agreement. Right?
Yeah.
And what you're saying is, in order to seek agreement, you have to be open to understanding and really listening to someone else. So that leads us into habit number 5, which is seek first to understand and then be understood. And I think it's hard for people to do because we get ego that gets in the way.
Yeah, it is.
But and by the way, not every contract, right, is going to work like that. But your dad said, I think I wrote it down here somewhere. Here we go. Your dad would say, if you can learn to listen empathically, you can be 10 times more effective with people.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with that. This is the habit. People ask me, what's my favorite? Is this one. Why? Because it's hard and it's totally unnatural. We're taught how to write, how to speak, how to manage projects. Very few people have ever been taught how to listen, which is the most important communication skill of all. It really is.
Yes.
And if you want to have influence with other people, you've got to be a good listener. And most leaders think they're good at listening and they suck.
Yep. Agreed. Seriously.
They do. And they'll, I'm a good listener. I am. Most are not good. And, one sign of it is go to a meeting, with a leader and the team and watch, count the percentage of time that people are taking up in the meeting. If you're the leader and you're spending 80% of the time talking, you got a problem.
Love
and
that.
The thing that makes us successful, which is empathy, which is understanding other people and listening to other people, and we rise up in the ranks and we become a leader, is typically the thing that destroys us once we become a leader, because we can become blind to feedback and we stop listening, and it can really hurt us. And there's a lot of science and research behind this, which I quote in the book.
That's right, you do.
But practicing habit 5 is two things: the intent, right, and the skill. I want to listen to another person because I respect them, and they might have an idea that is different than mine, that might be better than mine. That's the intent. And then the skill. You got to have both to be a good listener. And the skill is, anytime there's an emotional issue, you've got to use the idea of reflect back in your own words what the other person is saying and feeling. Okay? Someone comes to you, like my wife did a couple of years ago, and said, my mom is staying over this weekend. I said, that's great. No, it's not. You don't think that way. You are always spending way more time with your family. You think your family is so much more fun than mine. And okay, high emotion, right? This is a time to be empathetic.
Right.
So what's my intent? I really want to help my wife and understand where she's coming from. So I reflect back in my own words what she's saying and feeling. So honey, I can see you're really upset about this. And you feel that we spend way more time with my family than yours. Despite your mom coming over and me showing any hesitancy is such a big deal. Is that how you feel? Absolutely, that's how I feel. And I just think that you don't even make an effort with my family. So you feel like I don't really make the effort that I should. Absolutely. And you haven't done that for years. And I feel so bad because my family doesn't live around here and yours does. And so, I just kept reflecting, unpeeled the layers of the onion. There's no technique here. I'm not trying to figure her out. I'm listening. And I got to the root of the issue, how she really felt. I had no idea. Changed my paradigm. After that, the way I treated her family was different. The amount of time we spent with the families was different. So that's what habit 5 is. It's getting to the root of an issue. Anytime there's a jugular issue, you want to be a good listener. You want if an employee emotional issue, you might need to say, you know what, TJ, I sense that you're really upset the way of Jane is always taking credit for your work. And this has been going on for a long time. And is that how you feel? So that's the idea. It's a powerful concept.
You were really real here when you went through in that chapter, in that section that you wrote, a lot of questions, like let's get real questions. And one of them I thought was great is someone asked you, should you use habit 5 all the time? And your response was no. There is a time and a place for empathic listening when the topic, so this is the key, listening when the topic is important, sensitive, or really personal. Like when a colleague needs career advice, or if you're having a communication problem with a loved one. These conversations can't be rushed. A good rule of thumb is to use empathy anytime emotions are high.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really good.
Yeah, because in casual conversations, you don't need to. If someone comes to you and says, I have to go to the bathroom, you wouldn't say, so if I understand you correctly, you really need to go, right?
That wouldn't work. Yeah, that wouldn't.
No, small talk can be give and take, back and forth, but these are crucial conversations, right?
Yeah.
These are critical. They happen all the time. Every day you probably have 1 or 2 or 3. Every week you're going to have some. And boy, you want to be a good communicator, seek first to understand.
Love it.
Then your prescription will be listened to, right?
Yeah, more likely to be listened to.
More likely. Yeah.
For sure. So, okay, let's wind down on this. I love the habit number 6, synergize, just the idea of the third alternative, how powerful that is. You have your knowledge, the other person has their knowledge, their skills and so forth, and putting them together can create a third alternative. Any quick thoughts on that? Yeah,
quick thoughts are synergy works. It's 1 + 1 = 3.
Yeah.
The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. We've all experienced this when you're on a team with people where there's high trust and respect, and you can banter and go back and forth and create things you could never do by yourself, right?
Right.
We've all experienced this. Key to synergy, couple things. 1, you've got to value differences, not be threatened by them. If someone thinks differently than you, that's good, right? One is unnecessary if you think the same. That's one key thing. The second thing is you've got respect. You got to be able to banter, to brainstorm, respect differences, and realize that everyone's smart in different ways.
Right.
All the new research shows multiple intelligences. Howard Gardner was kind of the pioneer in this area. Harvard Graduate School of Business, about people are smart linguistically with words, or mathematically, or kinesthetically with their bodies, or spatially, or personally. They have high self-awareness, or interpersonally sensing other people, right? And that's what we traditionally call EQ. There's always kind of like IQ, then it became EQ, and now there's like 13 of these, and there's more nuances, right? People are so smart. You got to respect those differences and value them and put them together and have a high trust culture where you can create third alternatives to problems.
Love it. Okay. And then the last one is renewal, sharpen the saw. This basically means balance between the physical, mental, social, emotional, and spiritual. So I just want to thank you for being on the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast. Any last words? Any thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I'd just say, TJ, it's been an honor to be on your show. These principles that we're discussing are powerful. They're true. There's great potential in every person. I just leave with this idea, a definition of leadership that my dad told me once is that leadership is communicating to another person their worth and potential so clearly they are inspired to see it in themselves. Beautiful definition. And that's what, as leaders, there's probably a lot of leaders listening to this show right now. Yeah. You don't have to be in a formal position to be a leader. You can be on the team and be the leader of the team, because there's moral authority and there's informal authority, right? And if you might have the moral authority even though you're not the leader. for leaders, that's what leadership's all about, is helping to communicate to another person, you are so valuable and you have so much worth and potential, and they see it in the way you treat them. That's what it's all about. So great being with you. You're the best.
It was great being with you too. Thank you, Sean. Appreciate it.
Okay, DJ, be in touch.
All
Take
right,
care.
let's do it. Bye-bye.
I'll see you. Bye.
All right.